Coming to you from a portable microphone, this is Don't Get Me Started. This is a conversation about advertising. And here is your host, freelance creative director and creative circus department head, Dan Balser.
Yes, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for staying with me. Today will be the second CCO of Leo Burnett. And I was thinking about maybe having a trivia contest for the first person to let me know who the other one was. But it was Susan Cradle, so you lost. I won. I will give myself my little one club deck of cards as the prize and save the postage. So Britt Nolan is here, as you know, from the title of the episode. Real quick, let's go through this. So he started off as an intern at BBDO, was a copywriter, and kind of learned his trade. Let's say that's, since he did not go to ad school, at Elberson Sengler Schuler, which is in Charlotte.
Was in Charlotte,
North Carolina.
The late Elberson Singer Schuler.
Rest in peace. Made his way to Chicago in August of 2004, where he worked at Mark USA. Then he was at Tribal DDB for about a year. Actually, longer than that. 2 different titles adds up to 3 years.
Yep.
And he's been at Leo Burnett for 8 years. And recently, I would say, within the last year, and by the time you hear this, it's going to be closer to probably 13 months since he was promoted to Chief Creative Officer of Leo Burnett. That's about the fastest intro I've ever done. Welcome to the Creative Circus.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That's what Britt sounds like. Just came out of a forum, as listeners are used to hearing. We just came out of a forum, and I'm sorry for you that you missed it. So let's jump straight into some stuff. Let's first of all, do you like doing these things? Do you like coming to schools and looking at student work and talking in front of rooms and talking on a little recorder that you don't know what the point of this thing is and who's going to listen to it? I mean, is this cool? Do you enjoy these kind of ancillary parts of this job?
Yeah, I do. I do for the most part. I love coming to the schools. I love seeing what the kids are doing. I love talking to them. It's so refreshing. I love the change of pace of doing this for a day. Nice. Is really cool. And I made it a rule that, like, if anything kind of makes me nervous, public speaking wise, or, an interview, then I have to do it.
Interesting.
Because I think you just have to get comfortable with that stuff. So the recorder freaks me out a little bit more than a live audience, but I do. I enjoy it.
So would it help you to know that, like, I have the control of, like, cutting stuff out? Like, this is just this is an experiment. Like, this isn't even necessarily real until it's real. We can make that decision ourselves. Does that take the pressure off?
Yeah, that fucking takes all the fucking pressure off.
Right? Why? Are you being sarcastic?
Will you cut that out? No, I was just testing you.
Okay, good.
Wait, can I say that?
Oh, the F word? I didn't even notice it. I didn't notice the F word. Oh, I'm listening to him say, it takes the fucking pressure off. Okay, all right. Is it for real?
I thought maybe you'd edit that out.
No, I don't edit that out. No, I don't edit that part out. That would, you'd lose the interest. I meant to say this before we started. Britt was responsible, you were responsible in large part for the wonderful Allstate Mayhem campaign, which to me is, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, not just great creative, but a really good problem solve for that brand in that category at the time. Really, really strategic work that doesn't seem that strategic until you realize that the line on all those commercials is, you may not be covered for that with your cheap insurance. This is really brilliant stuff. And I also wanted to let people know before we start that you can see the work, all of that on Leo Burnett's website, and you can also find links on my Facebook podcast page, DGMS Podcast on Facebook. So I meant to say that at the beginning. Do you feel like you're, as a creative, fighting your way out of the shadow of mayhem? Is it a pride thing for you? Is it something that you are getting tired of talking about or still excited talking about? How does it fit into your career arc at this point?
Yeah, I don't get sick of it.
That's cool.
I haven't gotten sick of it. I mean, I've definitely made sure to not cling to it too hard. A few years ago, it was, kind of all anybody wanted to talk about was, what do we do with mayhem? How do we keep it alive? How do we keep it relevant? And I thought, if we can keep it alive and keep it strong, that's awesome. I also have no problem, tearing it down and building something else if that's the right thing to do. But no, I mean, it's been so fun, and I'm super proud of it that I don't get sick of it, really.
Well, you said something in forum that I thought was really cool about the work that you're proud of and that excites you. It's more than the work that the agencies sort of pat each other on the back for and win awards. But how do you define the successful work? I'm going to let you answer the question the way you said it earlier, because I thought it was pretty great.
Yeah, I like the work that regular people know, right? I like the work that neighbors ask me about, and the story I mentioned in the forum was, when we did the Van Gogh bedroom thing. Just after it had kind of hit and taken off, my mom called and was like, "Did you have something to do with this Van Gogh's bedroom thing?" And I thought, wow. I mean, the fact that like it really, it's not just like 1 degree of separation from me to my mom. I don't tell her what I'm working on. So the fact that it got to her meant that it had gone, all the way around the world and back.
Exactly.
And I was super proud of that.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And this is coming from somebody that like I grew up on, my older sister and I used to watch movies like crazy, right? And we would recite every script back and forth as entertainment. And one of the VHS tapes we had was a video called Commercial Crazies. And it was basically just Joe Settlemeyer's reel.
Oh, wow. And
it was just ads. And we would memorize them and quote them. And, it was the old like FedEx stuff and...
it's funny you say FedEx stuff, because I'm remembering my childhood. We had a camcorder, my brother and me, and neither of us even knew advertising was a thing you could do. Yeah. And we were in high school, and we set it up, and we did these fake commercials that were like, I remember one of them, we were just like grabbing things in the room, and as if it was like some guy selling stuff. We're hacking, slashing, maiming prices. We'd pick up the dog and say, "This poodle, $2.99," and just to crack each other up. Just no one ever saw them, but there was sort of this... just something about wanting to entertain or something like that. Something about just wanting to be able to... And you said another thing in form about like that someone can help you. When in advertising is one of those, is probably the only business where you can get someone to pay for you to
produce your thing,
produce your idea. Yeah.
And it gets seen.
That's crazy. So can I talk about you for a second?
Sure.
Okay, so here you are, 2017. I don't know how you define your success. We'll talk about that in a little bit, whether you are feeling successful or whether there's another thing to grab. But so far, I'd say a lot of people would look at your career and say it's been successful. What personal trait of yours, what do you think it is about Britt Nolan? What is it about you that you think has been the most advantageous or valuable trait of yours to help you get where you are now?
I would say, I've thought about this recently.
Why?
Just because it helps to kind of understand where you want to go if you do. Mm-hmm. I think I had heard recently that one of the traits of successful leaders is self-reflection, that active, self-reflection. And so, this is a recent one, but one of the things about me that I think works is I'm good at making a group dynamic work. I'm good at being in the middle of a room full of difficult personalities or diverse collaborators and making sense of it. I grew up in a family of 4 kids, not a huge family, but big enough. And I noticed a few years ago that was kind of my role in the family a little bit. And
where are you in the birth order?
Number 2.
Okay.
And I just it's something about me that I can't quite explain, but I tend to bring people together and get a room gelling, and so I draw on that.
How good do you think you are at reading somebody's character?
Not as good as I want to be.
Right, that's a tough one.
Yeah, I have to push myself to be a little less quick to like people, because I tend to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I'm the opposite. I go like you have to mess it up. And it's,
You've been burned?
Yeah, I mean, not badly enough that there's like any one burn that stands out in my mind, but it's something I know about myself. I tend to really like people. I'm like, oh, that person's awesome, and then if they disappoint me, I feel foolish.
God, I think it was Susan Cradle that talked about being almost a casting agent. Is that when you talk about group dynamic? Is it about finding the right person for each role, each project, or is it about making sure that the team collaborates together well?
It's more about making sure that the team collaborates together well. I find that in our business, the campaigns we're making are just getting increasingly complex, right? It's never just you're making one piece of work or one, campaign and putting it out there. There's always a lot of components. And most projects reach a point where people are frustrated because, this person's not talking to that person and they're trying to keep it all together. And I find the solution every time is just get everybody in the room and just hammer through it. And, I'll wind up in the middle of these debates where, people aren't working well together. And if we just all get together and hash it out.
It's not human nature to confront. You have to have the catalyst to do that. You have to have a leader to say, there's probably not anything here happening. But the fact is we all think there is something going on, getting in each other's way.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
Cool.
And I often think my job is to kind of figure out what everybody's going for, what's motivating
that's
them,
interesting.
and try to get that communicated.
Isn't that
right?
crazy? We think everybody's got the same end goal, and everybody
totally
has their own end goal.
Yeah, completely.
Wow.
And people who are people who are assholes at work, they're assholes because most of the time, some people are just plain assholes, but most of the time I think it's because they have something very specific that they're trying to do and they don't think everybody else gets it, or they don't trust the people around them, and they become difficult to work with. But when you engage that person, you draw it out of them and you find out what's motivating them, and often we're going for sort of the same thing. They get a lot easier to work with. They feel respected, and then we break down, those barriers.
I think that's great. They perceive it as a threat rather than something that can actually help them achieve it. That's really interesting. So you mentioned sort of traits of leadership. Do you think of yourself, have you always thought of yourself through the lens of leadership, or is that something that you have sort of applied to your practice in the role?
It's something that's happened pretty organically for me. Because I think I always thought of leadership as being, someone who likes being up on a pulpit, commanding, and that's very much not my style. I view myself as I'm like a shy extrovert, which is weird because, if you think of introvert versus extrovert as whether you draw your energy from being alone or whether you draw your energy from being with others. I draw my energy from being with others big time. I'm almost never alone in my life. I went from, straight from living at home to living with a roommate who became my best friend to being married and having kids. I've never lived on my own. Right. I'm always with people at work. I go home to a full house of kids.
There's 6 people in that house.
Yeah. But I also, at the same time, I don't like being the center of attention.
Right. I don't think a leader does a leader have to be the center of attention? Nothing you have described, do I picture you as the center of attention? Maybe the middle of a room, but not the center of attention. That's really interesting. And I asked you the birth order. I think nothing determines sort of personality as much as birth order.
I totally agree.
And from the position of second, it's an observational vantage point. Right, there's not as much responsibility, so there's a little bit of sort of psychic space to analyze the world, right?
Yeah.
And you can kind of be in the shadow of the firstborn, who's usually kind of has anxiety and too much responsibility and insufferable, and then the baby who gets all the attention. So from the second position, I'd be very curious to know how many leaders, where you look at creative directors, CCOs, and CEOs, where they fell in birth order would be a really interesting thing to
it would
learn.
be
fascinating.
It would be, because I think it's so important. And I actually I read somewhere that every baby from the time they're born has an instinct to differentiate. So you can't possibly be like your siblings. Everyone, if there's a loud one, you'll be quiet. If one is needy, the other is self-sufficient, and it's super interesting how family dynamics work.
Probably also if you go back to sort of our base survival DNA, it's probably to differentiate yourself, to eliminate redundancy.
Yeah, totally.
Because redundancy is redundant.
Yep.
That's really, really interesting by definition. So how do you define success for yourself, for the career, for your family, for Leo Burnett?
Boy, that's a...
Do you feel successful? Let's make it easy. Question. Do you feel successful?
In some ways, I feel like I should feel successful.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I do think that's a really important point, though. I think people get to a point where they reach this sort of perceived top, and it's supposed to feel different somehow.
Yep.
But you're still waking up in the same mind and body, and you still have to be relevant in a similar yet adjusted way.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to feel like success, but I think that's why I asked the question, how do you define it? Like what's the thing that makes you feel that, yeah, this is working, or this is good, or I've gotten to a certain place?
Yeah. I mean, I think like, I feel successful if I'm having an impact, if the things I'm doing in general in life are affecting others. And I guess when I say I'm not sure if I do, then I'm drawing a distinction between like successful or like satisfied. And I guess you got to separate the two, because I don't feel satisfied. I don't think that, I guess you can imagine how, you imagine your own success and you think like, oh, well, someday it's going to be easy street. I'll just sit back and, relax and, count up the things that I've achieved. But it certainly doesn't feel like that at all.
I imagine it will.
Which I guess is just satisfaction. But yeah, I guess I feel successful. I just feel like we've got so much more to do that I don't know. Like, I guess I'd be concerned about people that feel too successful.
Yeah, because it implies contentment. It implies like you can kind of rub your hands. Complacency, yeah.
Yep.
That's fascinating. Radically switching gears. I don't know how much contact you at your job now have with young hires, new teams coming in. You did mention some earlier that I mean, I thought it was, first of all, it says a lot about you that you could name the junior teams that worked on some assignments with a creative group of 350 people. Hats off to you. What's the best way for a young hire to endear himself or herself to you? What do you kind of look for? What do you want from those people?
I can't tell if this is a cop out of an answer, but the best way is to just be doing great work that gets my attention. I mean, it's most often you discover somebody by saying, who did that?
Oh, that's cool.
And you find out who did it. It's the thing I've always loved about this business is that the truth comes out in the work, right? Like there's no bullshitting a resume. Your book is your book. And
I think a book has multiple truths, though.
I think it does too.
I think talent and work ethic are like they wear the same suit. I mean, the work is good, but could you do it for me by tomorrow afternoon?
Yep. And
the work is good, but do you think it's going to happen to you every time? You know, so that's the tricky part about hiring. And
totally.
Amy's sitting in the room right now, the recruiter from Leo Burnett. I think that. Okay, can I ask her a question? Can I ask you a question?
No, this is all about me.
I'm fine with that.
So Amy Zanglin is in the room. She's the Leo Burnett recruiter. And I have a question about knowing who did work and expecting. And have there ever been hires in your experience who didn't live up to their portfolio?
Yeah.
And that she thought about that.
That was really quick. Yeah.
I timed that at 0.3 of a second. Yes. And have you ever looked at someone's portfolio and gotten a sense that possibly they didn't do the work that's in the book? Like, how does that happen?
Yes.
It has happened. Okay.
I look for consistency in it.
You look for
You
consistency.
just have one amazing, and then the rest of you're like, well, I don't know, who are they working with on that?
That's
campaign?
really interesting.
You need at least a couple.
Right. Listeners, if you didn't hear that, she said that she looks for consistency in a portfolio because if you have just one piece, it's like, well, how did that lightning happen to fall into the bottle? I was just talking about this with my wife yesterday with Gary Goldsmith back in the day. Said he would hire people for just the one great thing, thinking that that's their high watermark, and we can get them to do that every time. I can't imagine that's wise.
Yeah.
How hard do you want to work?
Right. To try to draw that out.
Don't you have a job?
Yeah, right.
Anyway, so you want great work, and then what's the best way that they could just screw it up? I mean, like what have you seen, or what do you want to warn young professionals starting their career against?
I don't know. I mean, I guess getting stuck. As I said to the group this morning in the forum, like the only way I think you can really fail as a junior is to just not do much. Mm-hmm. I think, you just have to be trying constantly. And, when people come in and say, I didn't have anything, it's like, how'd you not have anything? This is your job.
That's right. Can I ask a question? Would I get in trouble? Okay, so if I'm a copywriter, not junior or a mid-level, I'm a copywriter. I'm in a group. I'm in let's call him John's group, and things are slow, or I just got a bunch of stuff killed, and the ACD's team stuff is produced, and we're waiting for briefs. Would I get in trouble if I went over to David's group and just said, "Do you guys have a brief I can work on?" I mean, is that going to get me in trouble for walking down the hall and getting a brief from another creative director?
Absolutely not. I mean, that's the way to do it. I think, look, so we're assuming that you're not doing it at the expense of your other work.
That's why I said my work just got,
so your work just
got killed, or I'm between projects or something else just sold, or
yeah, then absolutely. And I love people that do that. The problem comes when someone, would rather work on someone else's brief than the thing that they've been assigned to.
Oh yeah.
So they phone in their daily work while they're working on the cool stuff. But
right, they shouldn't be getting paid at that point.
But God, no, we love that. And actually, our environment is, I think, makes it pretty easy to do that kind of thing.
That's cool. Yeah. Is it the physical structure of the environment, or the sort of the philosophical structure of the environment?
A little bit of both. I mean, we have an open space, and people. I think people generally know who each other are and what's going on, and if you're hungry, there's opportunity. I don't think, and everybody always needs extra hands, right? So
it's good to know.
Yeah. So I don't think anytime you come to a creative director and want to work on something, it would be very unusual for someone to say no.
That's cool. I was just asking, would I get in trouble from either the other teams in that group or my creative director? That's the concern. Would the other writer and art director teams in group 2, David's group, be upset that I'm poaching their briefs? And would my creative director, John, creative director 1, be what the hell? We've got that's the worry I think that I would have, that I'm kind of taking food from the neighbor's farm.
Yeah, which I guess they would a little bit if that. I say if the proactive work you're seeking out doesn't interfere with your day job, and it almost always does though. In some way, I mean, you were slow for a minute and you asked somebody else for a brief and then did pretty good work for them, and now you're committed to a project. And when John needs you again, you're busy on somebody else's stuff.
That's not good.
That can be a little bit of a problem,
a little sticky.
But we don't see a lot of fighting about stuff like that.
Right, I wouldn't imagine.
Yeah.
Speaking of problems, I was going to ask you this question too. So I know what kind of problems we have to solve as creatives. Now as CCO, what kind of problems are you having to solve? What does your day in your life look like? What are you having to apply your thinking to?
Boy, it's okay. So for one, it's almost like any problem that could exist in an agency is on my radar, right?
The air conditioning's not working.
Yeah, part of my job is dealing with all that stuff that nobody wants to deal with. But I tend to, I really like being close to the work, and I tend to treat my job like jumping into one fire. From one to the next.
You like that?
I do. Yeah. So I'll go, any given week, I'll have something that I'm going deep on, while juggling the other stuff, which I think is a blast. It's I can just work on everything, and I like the problems.
That's cool. How many unread emails do you have in your on average unread emails in your inbox?
Thousands.
You're one of those.
I'm one of those.
Yeah.
I check my email. I come in early. I read email until about 8:30 in the morning, and then after about 8 o'clock at night, and there's stuff in the middle that gets lost. You got to treat me like direct mail. You got to grab me with a subject line.
Right? Exactly.
I probably shouldn't admit that, but there's a lot I get missed.
Well, we're not giving your email address. I mean, that's the hardest thing in the world to write. Subject line on an email.
Totally.
It's crazy. So knowing what you know now, if you could go back in time to the day that you finished school, what would you whisper in young Britt's ear? What do you wish you'd known about this journey going in?
I don't know. I mean, I'm glad that there's a lot that I didn't know. I mean, it's just been fun to feel it out and learn.
Mm-hmm.
I don't regret anything. There's nothing I would have done differently, honestly.
So, it's funny because had this conversation with Jeff Goodby a little while back, and he said he has this recurring dream of driving a bus into like a fog bank, and he's the one driving, and it's like, so I think he causes him a lot of anxiety to think about sort of what's coming. That doesn't for you?
No, because I don't attempt to predict.
Right.
I think that's,
take it as it comes.
It's just too difficult. You got to, preparing is better than predicting. Mm-hmm. I do have, speaking of dreams, I had one the other night, and it was very telling. I was at a water park, and I was trying to get up to the top of a water slide, and I went through the line. I went into a room where there was like this really fucked up, awful ladder you had to try to climb to get up to it. I spent like so much time trying to make it to the top of that thing, and on my way back down, I saw that there was a door that had been behind me that opened right up to a staircase that everybody else was taking to get to the top of the slide. And I thought, I think I'm making something that should be fun really difficult.
Yeah, you think?
That's the thing that causes me the biggest anxiety is like sometimes this job is really fun and sometimes it's not. And when it's not, I'm like, what am I doing wrong? This should be fun. This isn't supposed to suck.
It just reminded me of a key that doesn't fit and you have to do it real gently, right? And then also, like, I was just talking about this in class this week, a team, I said, if the ideas are coming easy and you're struggling on the other campaign, you need to throw the other one away, because if you can't have good ideas on it, then you don't have a good idea.
Right.
If you can't come out with executions, then it's because you're in a dusty field.
Yeah.
You need to go in a fertile field.
Right. Just stop.
The last thing I want to ask you, I want you to tell the listeners the ideal person guide, the Leo Burnett ideal person guide. I thought that was genius. You went through it really quick, and I want to hear it again.
Oh, yeah. So our kind of core values, which I remember hearing in my orientation and they stuck with me, is eyes of a child, hands of a craftsman, heart of a champion, soul of a citizen.
Eyes of a child.
Yep. So curiosity, right? That kind of wonder about the world. Hands of a craftsman, taste and the ability to do things well, to own your craft. Heart of a champion is, perseverance. I think there's not quite enough of that. I don't think people realize how difficult this is going to be, and you have to push and you have to believe, and you've got to have heart. And soul of a citizen, which is, on the macro level, the agency being a good citizen in the city of Chicago and looking for places to create a little good in the world, but also like just people being good collaborators and good teammates, and thinking about the bigger picture. And I think when you think of people through those four lenses, it's incredibly helpful.
Do you hold that rudder in sort of your consciousness, or is it built into your instinct now? Do you think about these things when you're analyzing personnel, who you're gonna keep, who's gonna go, what business you're gonna pitch, organizational things?
It's a little more just part of the consciousness now. Mm-hmm. It's it's kind of how we structure our performance reviews of people, so people get viewed through that lens, but it's not a conversation we're constantly having. Yeah.
Well, thank you for talking.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's not hard, right?
No, this went really fast.
Right?
Yeah.
Listeners, thank you so much for listening too. You can always reach me at danspodcast@mac.com. Make sure you like the Facebook page, facebook.com/DGMS podcast. You can also find the entire collection of these episodes on balserville.com. You can listen to them right through your smart device, also at the iTunes store. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another conversation. Until then, thanks again for listening. And Britt, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was cool.
This was fun for me as well. Listeners, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
All right. Easy.
254, 255 episodes later.
Wow. That's awesome. What a great idea, though.